Another U.S. ambassador attack, this time in South Korea, where Ambassador Mark Lippert was slashed in the face by a man shouting anti-war slogans during a public event at an arts center in Seoul. We welcome you into America's Forum on this Thursday morning. Alongside Miranda Kahn, I'm J.D. Hayworth.
The ambassador, a former U.S. Navy SEAL, was cut on the right cheek and is said to be in stable condition after surgery at a hospital in Seoul. But as we saw, he suffered some nerve damage to his left arm as a result.
We will continue to monitor his condition, Miranda. As for the assailant, police identified that man as a 55-year-old with a history of violence toward political figures, including an alleged attack on the Japanese ambassador back in 2010. For more on this developing story, we're pleased to be joined by former Congressman Bob Walker. Bob served 20 years in the House of Representatives, and he joins us via Skype here on our South Florida anchor desk. We're also pleased to be joined by Mark Foley. Mark and I went to Congress together back following the 1994 elections. To you both, we thank you for being here. And Mark, this situation in Seoul today, if this assailant attacked a Japanese ambassador, sounds like the South Koreans have problems keeping dangerous people away from diplomatic personnel.
You wonder how they let him in the room. You would think he would have been on a watch list. It's very tragic. The world's unstable. It's unsafe. Our own personnel are put in harm's way all the time, and our prayers are with him. Very, very sad.
What kind of security measures are usually in place for ambassadors, or U.S. ambassadors around the country and the world?
State Department has a good team. Excuse me, I'm having this terrible allergies.
I know, in Florida, we should say the pollen count has been extremely high.
No, State Department personnel are there to protect local personnel, local police help add some backdrop to that. But something tells me they had information on the suspect.
Right, because he has a rap sheet.
Had him out of the room.
Right.
And that's a tragic set of events. We've got to protect our personnel better than this. Benghazi was a problem, obviously. Mm-hmm. People were killed. So this is one more example where the State Department fails to fully protect its personnel.
Bob Walker, do you agree?
This is one of those incidents, though, where you have to believe that the perceived weakness of the U.S. around the world does help to inspire some of these kinds of attacks. I'm concerned that our diplomatic personnel all over the world are at risk simply because we are not being seen as a strong country anymore.
And mindful of that, I wonder, Mark Foley, if we're going to hear today from Foggy Bottom that there is some sort of tightening down and a review of security procedures, not only for those embassies, but for protective details and ambassadors when they leave the embassy grounds.
Hopefully it won't be on private emails. Hopefully. No,
nice.
Seriously.
Yeah.
We have to address this issue. They must be firm and resolute. You cannot send diplomats into harm's way. You've got to be transparent. And you've got to acknowledge terrorism exists. It exists everywhere in the globe.
So Bob, I want to ask you, because you were kind of alluding that, our country needs to do more to protect our ambassadors. You were saying that, Mark. Bob, do you agree? Is Secretary of State John Kerry, is he somewhat accountable for what happened in Korea?
Well, I don't think he's fully accountable, and we have beefed up a lot of embassy security in the recent past. The problem is that our ambassadors do move around. They have some limited security available to them, but the countries of the world, and particularly terrorists and so on, take into account whether or not they think that our nation will respond to these kinds of attacks. The Benghazi episode has shown much of the world that our response is not as powerful as it should be.
Bob and Mark, as we look at politics here at home, Mike Huckabee was on this program yesterday. He says he's waiting until the spring for any exploratory committee. Of course, Dr. Ben Carson formally kicked off an exploratory examination of the presidency, and Dr. Carson has gotten in some hot water for some social issue comments. He says as a result of being distorted by the mass media, he's not going to weigh in on lifestyle arguments. Mark, do you have a reaction to Dr. Carson?
Well, he probably shouldn't have gone there. That's not a good example. It wasn't appropriate. Prisoners and gays, it didn't make any sense to me. It's certainly not a choice. I disagree with him. but I believe he has the right to express an opinion. We have to respect free speech, and I do like the man.
And, of course, Dr. Carson is hard at work on a presidential campaign. We appreciate very much the comments on these wide-ranging topics this morning. We will continue to talk about headlines in the news, specifically the Select Committee with a subpoena of Hillary Clinton now, and the curious emails that she was keeping and the servers literally in her basement in Washington, D.C., far from the State Department.